Welcome to the Bookman's Corner. I'm Lois Lindstrom. My guest is best-selling author David L. Robbins, who writes high-octane military adventures. His book, War of the Rats, was made into Enemy at the Gates, a major Hollywood movie. In his latest book, The Devil's Waters, a band of Somali pirates hijacks a cargo ship bound for Iran, but they don't count on an elite U.S. pararescue soldier already being aboard the ship, nor do they expect his entire unit to come to the rescue, determined to take back the ship, no matter what the cost. As both sides lock in a deadly struggle for control, the U.S. military issues an ominous ultimatum. Either the pirates are eliminated within an hour, or the entire ship will be bombed into scrap metal. A very exciting read. Welcome to the Bookman's Corner, David.
Thank you, Lois.
Our viewers should know that your latest book, The Devil's Waters, is one of 10 action-packed novels you've written, including Broken Jewel, The Assassin's Gallery, The Betrayal Game, and Scorched Earth. David currently teaches advanced creative writing at VCU in Richmond, Virginia. What inspired you to write the intriguing storyline for your latest book, The Devil's Water?
Well, you mentioned I'd written 10 novels, and most of the 9 that preceded The Devil's Waters were historical.
Yes.
And large, epic scope.
Yes.
War of the Rats, you mentioned, became the movie. It's about the fall of Stalingrad.
Very exciting. Yes.
I've written about the giant tank battle of Kursk, the fall of Berlin, the fall of Paris. And I wanted to try to move into something contemporary.
Okay.
And so The Devil's Waters is kind of, I'm sort of leaving historical writing behind for a while, and talking about contemporary world issues. And,
like what's in the news now,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's really, it's very jazzing, and it's a whole different kind of research.
Okay. Well, I was very curious about why you focus so much on this pararescue group from the Air Force, the PJs. How did you learn about them?
Interestingly, and I'd been really taken by the whole Somali piracy thing. So I was looking for a vessel for that. I wanted to write about Somali pirates. Okay. And I had this sort of storyline in mind. And then one day I was watching TV, and you know those wonderful ads about it's today's Air Force, it's not science fiction, it's today's Air Force.
Yes.
Well, I was watching this ad, and these 2 guys jump out the back of a V-22, an Osprey. And they're sailing through the air, and they're free-falling, and on their goggles you see this pilot, he's down, and he's holding a beacon, and they land like witches, and they go, "We're going to get you out of here, sir." Next thing you know, this chopper comes up, and they're whisked away, and it's like something out of Harry Potter.
Yes.
And I'm sitting there, an old man, I'm going, man, if I was 23, I'd be doing that.
That's right, very
And then it
exciting.
goes, it's not science fiction, it's today's Air Force. And so I got on the phone, I said, who the hell are those guys? And they said, well, those are PJs, pararescue jumpers. And then I just tracked it down, and I put the Somali pirate story together with them, and I felt it was a really great fit.
Yeah, very exciting. And well, tell me about your research for this book. I mean, not many people know about the Somali pirates. I mean, they hear about them, but they don't really know what makes them tick.
Well, this is what's great about moving from historical writing to contemporary writing. Because historical writing, you're reading a lot of archives, a lot of unit histories. You're looking at really fascinating but kind of over history. Writing contemporary stuff, you're talking to cats who are doing it now.
Yes, yes.
And I can't be back in World War II, although I had fun. I've driven tanks, I've shot lots of cool guns.
Right.
But I got to go and do this stuff and meet these real people. It's a whole different kind of feel.
Well, so you went to Africa.
Yeah. This book is set in Hoa, which is Horn of Africa, from a base called Lemonnier in Djibouti. And I got to deploy with the PJ base, the RQS Rescue Squadron there for 2 weeks.
Now, Djibouti, that's very near Somalia, right?
It's right on the northwestern border of Somalia.
Okay, and a tiny country then, really.
Oh yeah, it's not much more than this city.
And well, what do you think? I mean, the book gave me a lot of insight into the country of Somalia, which I didn't know much about before. Do you think Americans are becoming more interested in Africa and the coast of Somalia?
Well, sure. I mean, look, the Somali pirates, bless their souls, have stayed in the news a lot. The tide has kind of turned against them.
Okay.
But for the longest time, and you know, we all think about that wonderful book Mark Bowden wrote, Black Hawk Down, which is about the Battle of Mogadishu in Somalia. Yes. And from that point, really up until today, Somalia has been a failed country, a failed government. Somali piracy is a fascinating thing. It's not as analog as you think, because you hear the word piracy, you go, oh, you know, bad.
Very bad, yeah.
But if you go back to the underpinnings of Somali piracy back in the middle, about 10 years ago, maybe about 2006, they didn't think of themselves, the Somalis didn't think of themselves as pirates. They thought of themselves as Coast Guard.
Ah.
They actually, Somali piracy comes out of the fact that because that was a failed government, other governments, the Japanese, Germans, us, they overfished the waters off the coast of Somalia. And because Somalia doesn't have its own Coast Guard, its own Navy to enforce its territorial limits, the waters were swept clean. So the
poor fishermen were out of jobs,
yeah,
right?
so the normal Somali fisherman got in his boat and he grabbed a bunch of guns and they started boarding these ships. The first one that was boarded was a Korean ship. And they said, look, you got to stop this. They put all the fish back, cut all the nets, and then held the ship for ransom. And that went so well, they said, someone scratched his head, said, well, you know, we got to make a living somehow, since we can't fish. And so Somali piracy just grew exponentially.
So the ship owners are paying the ransom then, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
and
some of these ransoms are in the tens of millions.
Now, why are they paying such a huge ransoms? I mean, why aren't they fighting these pirates back? I mean, why are they now?
Well, they are now, but for the longest time, maritime law is a very complex thing.
Okay.
If you if you have a freighter and that freighter starts at point A and goes to point, you know, B, C, D, and E. Each one of those countries has a different maritime law. So, for instance, you cannot pull into an Israeli port if you have guns on board your ship.
Oh.
You cannot pull into a Saudi port if you have
that.
guns on board your ship. So if you arm people and put them on a commercial freighter, you give up a whole lot of ports you can pull into.
Okay.
So there really isn't a uniform global maritime law. So what they've started to do now, well, let me back up. And so you say, well, why don't we just enforce the law on the ground in Somalia? Well, piracy is an act. You can't arrest somebody unless you catch them in the act.
Oh, okay. Didn't know that.
Right, and then if you catch them in international waters, it's a hodgepodge of maritime laws. Who has jurisdiction? The country of the ship that owns the ship, the country that flags the ship, the country of habitation of the crew.
And the United Nations is not involved in that at all, right?
It's still an emerging situation, and so the Somali pirates exploit that.
Okay, and they've done it very well. I mean, I think that your book is very exciting, and how do you try to grab the reader? I mean, what do you think captivates them?
Oh, my personal style is I like to write in a very cinematic way.
Yes.
I very much believe in the visual component of prose. I also I'm very, very dedicated to having flesh and blood characters. Although I write large-scale adventure stories, and even sometimes they're called thrillers. I don't like to take the human experience for granted. In my books, and you can take from the beginning to the end, it's an ethic for me, and I teach this, is that if you're going to have a character kill someone, taking a life, holding a weapon, discharging a weapon at a fellow human being, that's a jarring thing.
It is.
That should be a spiritually soul-wrenching thing.
Yes.
Certainly being on the other side of that and staring down a gun that's aimed at you, that's equally, these are
dramatic,
Exactly. These are tempestuous, emotional things. One of the earmarks of my work is that if somebody in my book falls in love, it matters. If they fall out of love, it matters. If they have sex, if they engage in violence, it matters. It's not rampant. And so I'm not only exploring the adventure components of my work, especially in this book, I'm also exploring the humanity of the people doing it. My characters have to be flesh and blood. They have to be vulnerable, because if they're not, they won't feel fear. They won't, their hands won't shake, and they have to shake. So for me, I try to captivate my reader by sharing my own insights into what it's like to be violent or what it's like to be heartbroken.
Well, that's one of the things I loved about this book, actually. As a woman, I don't really read military adventures. I prefer historical novels, but not so much high-tech. I mean, for instance, in your latest book, you feature a lot of high-tech, you have a lot of high-tech terms and technologies. And I found myself looking at your glossary at the back of the book to say, well, what exactly does that weapon do, and what does that mean? And so what did you learn before you began this research that you didn't know before in putting this book together?
Well, to sidestep the technology question just a moment and bring that in at the end, I want to go back to the answer I was giving you earlier about how different it is interviewing living people doing real things, jumping out of airplanes onto ships in the middle of the Gulf of Aden to take that ship back from Somalia. I've talked to guys who've done this kind of thing.
Okay.
And it's a really, really big difference. The thing I didn't know before that I had to imagine before, because when I was writing about my father's generation, World War II, you get to talk to the odd veteran, but you have to extrapolate because it was a long time ago.
Right.
To talk to the cats that are doing this, that have done this, that are going to go do it, they're training to do it, to see them train.
Big difference, yeah.
I've been on C-130s with them. I've been on choppers with them. I've been on firing ranges with them, and the thing that I didn't know was how truly remarkable these guys are. They really, and not just them. The pilots that take them into action, the support crews around them. I fell in love with the PJs. I admit I kind of wanted to write a book about them, but when I met them and I researched them and I hung out with them and I deployed with them, I really fell in love with these guys. Their motto, the Pararescue motto, is that others may live. It's the patch they wear, that others may live.
Yes.
I find that the most compelling and romantic, beautiful motto of any military unit I've encountered, anything I've ever heard. I love that notion.
And that's unique to that paramilitary group, isn't it? Because
yeah, well, the PJs are the most elite and highly trained special forces unit in the military.
In the most, okay.
There's thousands of Rangers, thousands of special forces, thousands of SEALs. There's 250 PJs.
Just 250?
Yeah, 250. And of course, they probably would like more.
Yes.
But they serve all four branches of the military.
They serve all four branches.
Yeah.
That's interesting. And of course, their training is so specialized, right? They have to be able to jump out of airplanes. They have to be able to apply medical devices. And
their mission task is called CSAR, Combat Search and Rescue.
Okay.
And what they do is they go after IP, isolated personnel. So as an example, if you're a downed pilot, your plane got shot down in the middle of a plain somewhere in Afghanistan and the bad guys are coming, the PJs come in and get you. If you're on top of a mountain at 12,000 feet in a snowstorm and you're snowblind, your buddy's got frostbite, they come get you.
It's really James Bond, isn't it?
Yeah, if you're underwater, if you're in a jungle, if you're in a plains, no matter where you are, if you were to go to a PJ base and look at one of their lockers, their lockers are the coolest thing. I mean, for a guy,
okay,
their lockers, there's high altitude jumping equipment and oxygen. There's jungle stuff. There's mountaineering equipment. There's scuba diving stuff. It's all in the same length. Like you can use all that and more.
Doesn't matter. I mean, they can ski. They can dive. They can jump. They're
a remarkable bunch of men.
Yeah, remarkable, incredible. I think that with this book you have imbued high-tech military action with the essence of human sacrifice and undying camaraderie. And then I read your novel and realized that you really dislike violence for violence sake. I mean, were you trying to leave a message about violence in this book?
Yeah, well, it's like I mentioned a little while ago. I read, you read, we all read too many books where characters are superhuman.
Yes.
Especially in adventure/thriller genre, the characters are superhuman.
And they're cold-hearted.
And the villains are cold-hearted and superhuman.
Yes.
And while you may get this big dollop of action, I think we explore the action, but we miss the experience.
Yes.
And again, it's one of the things I teach my students. As I said, explore the action, lay it all out for me. Let's have fun. Let's see technology. Let's say explosions and people running through smoke and stuff. But inside that is a character. Inside that's a human being. And so when somebody hurts somebody, even in the context of being in the military, people aren't cold-blooded. Villains aren't cold-blooded. They have a reason for why they do what they do. And just like normal people who are put in situations that demand heroism, that transformation of being ordinary to extraordinary, that becoming of heroic, that's a wrenching membrane to go through to become a hero.
Yes.
And do something heroic out of the flesh and blood that's a normal person. My work isn't just about the explosions. It's about the people that are lying under those explosions, that are pulling their helmet down, going, "Holy smokes!" You know.
How am I gonna get out of this?
How am I gonna get out of this? Yeah. And that I think makes the characters memorable and makes them much more fun for me to explore.
Absolutely does. And also there was a bit of a geopolitical message here too, because of the United States and our strong military presence. I mean, were you trying to convey with your novel that the U.S. has to be one step ahead of many other countries technically to maintain its power? I mean, did your research collaborate that?
Yeah. I don't think there's any question but that the United States is the world's largest force for good. And that's transmitted around the world in a lot of ways. But I think one of the biggest footprints that the United States can have, does have, and should always have is a strong military presence. We've seen this, it manifests itself in all kinds of ways outside of combat. You look at the tsunami in Japan. We mounted the largest relief and rescue effort in history, and most of that was military.
Really, that's right. People forget that. I think that military does do great things as well.
So I think it's all summed up by the statement that the United States has been and must always be the world's greatest force for good.
Yes.
And there's two operative words in that sentence, and that is good and force.
Yes, yes. Now, do you or any of your family members have a military background?
Yeah, my dad was at the Battle of, the Battle of Pearl Harbor. My mom
left.
World
War II,
yeah. Yeah. My mom left Pearl Harbor a couple weeks before the attack, and my brother was in Vietnam.
Okay, so you've heard stories, I suppose.
Oh, yeah.
And now tell us about the vivid cast of characters in your book here. Describe a couple of them for our viewers, because they are so compelling. I think I was really thinking to myself, well, how tall is LB? Because he's such an action-oriented guy and very masculine. And
he's about 5'8", and very stocky. And when he puts his hands on his hips, I describe him as a sugar bowl. The leading character is Gus DiNardo, Master Sergeant Gus DiNardo, who goes by the call letters LB, which stand for Little Bastard.
That's right.
And LB is he's a hard man, he's a tough man, but he's hard and tough on people to keep them alive.
Right, and he's very smart.
Yeah, he's very smart. His counterpart is a fellow named Wally Bloom. LB used to be a captain in the Rangers.
Okay.
And I know these are based on real characters.
Okay.
To become a PJ, there's two components of the PJs. There's the pararescue jumper, the PJ, who is a medic, a first-class trauma medic, and almost all these guys are also former combatants of some other kind. We've got a lot of former Marines, former Rangers, Special Forces, whatever, SEALs that make up the PJs.
Okay.
By the way, let me say that in training to become a PJ, a lot of these guys come from other services, again, SEALs, Marines.
So they've been well-trained in other branches of service, right?
The washout rate to become a PJ is 9 out of 10.
9 out of 10.
9 out of 10.
Incredible.
That means on any given day it's called SIE, self-identified elimination. So on any day during the 2-year pipeline of training to become a PJ, the hand that goes up that says, I don't want to do this anymore, is all too often a former Marine, a former SEAL, a former Ranger. Yeah, this is tough. It's tough to become these guys. But Wally used to be LB's protege. Okay. And again, I know these guys. These are real people that I know.
That's really cool.
And he was LB's protege, but Wally did not give up his commission, and LB did. So now here's LB, who's older than Wally and more experienced, but he's a sergeant and Wally is his captain. Whereas it used to be the other way around. LB was a captain and Wally was just a cadet at the Air Force.
Yeah. And then also I thought it was great that you went on board ship in Malta and then went through the Suez and ended up in Dubai, so that you have an experience of being on a ship and asking questions and finding out what life is like. And so what was your major takeaway from that experience?
Well, first of all, I had the best time. I spent 2 weeks on a massive commercial freighter. And the ship in the book, by the way, the Valnea, is named after the captain's wife, Valnea. I just had the best time on this ship. It was I got on it in Malta. Didn't stop.
Was it a U.S. ship? It
was French.
It was French.
Yeah, CMA CGM.
Okay.
Was the shipping company.
Okay.
And I got on Malta, rode all the way down through Suez and into the Red Sea, the Gulf of Aden, where all the pirates are, then out into the Gulf of Oman, around to Dubai. It took about 2 weeks.
Did you see any pirates?
You don't know. I mean, I think I did. I was up on the front with a $100 bill going, take us, research.
That's right.
I said, I'm going.
Take pictures.
But I learned, because the book takes place, most of the action takes place on board this freighter.
Okay.
And that has to be taken back, as you said, by the PJs. And there's no way to be able to convincingly depict a ship like that unless you know one intimately. And the captain and the engineer on board the ship. Both the engineer was Romanian and the captain is Croatian.
Very international crew.
Oh yeah. And a lot of the crew were Filipino.
Yeah.
They were great guys, and they were so generous. And spoiler alert: as you said, the boat is at risk of being sunk. So I needed to know how to sink
a huge,
a 400-meter long ship. And so every night after mess, after the captain, we would repair either out on deck or into the captain's office with beers and pretzels and talk about how to best sink a 400-meter ship.
Well, David, how about a 400-meter ship? Let's talk about how many football
That's
fields.
4 football fields.
4 football fields. That's how long it is.
This thing was huge, and it was 4 stories high.
4 stories high.
Yeah.
And how many men on a boat like that?
Crew of about 32.
32.
Yeah.
And how many containers? I mean, don't they have, This
was 11,000 containers.
11,000 containers filled with products, right?
Yeah, I mean, everything from motorcycle parts to Johnny Walker.
Anything and everything. Okay.
All of it locked.
That's amazing. I think most people realize how huge these cargo ships are.
Yes.
I love your description of Djibouti. Did you spend some time there?
Sure, yeah. Well, I mean, I spent 2 weeks at Camp Lemonnier, which is a big base. A lot of drones are there now, and they're expanding the airport all the time. It's becoming a very important base for the military. And it's right on the Horn of Africa.
You actually can see the drones
you really can't. They're sort of over in a secret part of the base.
Yes, I would think so.
But if you get on Google Earth and look down, you can see them. But it's a lot of drones that are handling. See, in Djibouti,
let's tell our viewers, where is Djibouti? Describe exactly where it is.
Imagine the Horn of Africa.
Horn of Africa.
And Somalia takes up most of the Horn of Africa, and there on the northwest corner of Somalia is this little country called Djibouti.
Okay, and how many people do you think live there?
In Djibouti, 1 million maybe.
1 million. Okay, a tiny country, really.
Tiny,
Okay. And now, let's go back to the pirates. I mean, why has it been a policy for many ship owners to pay the ransom when their boat crews are hijacked by the pirates?
You don't have a lot of option. I mean, these guys, let's understand one thing. The pirates are not barbarians. These are experienced seamen. These are men who have for years made their living on the water.
Before they were fishermen.
They were fishermen. That means these guys are good.
Yes.
They're hardened men.
Yes.
They are also all too often desperate men.
Sure.
Who are made hungry and destitute by a lot of forces not of their own making.
And also, I noticed in this book you always said the thin Somalis. They're all pretty thin, aren't they?
Well, yeah. I mean, it's a desperate, lawless land.
Okay.
And so if you are a ship owner and your ship's been taken by Somali pirates, you don't have a lot of option except to negotiate with them. You're not going to be able to send in special forces and take them back because that becomes an Alamo. What the Somalis do is once they kidnap a ship, they hijack it, they drop the anchor a couple miles off the coast of Somalia. Mm-hmm. Then they put a couple, many dozens of armed men on board this ship.
Oh, they do?
And then they shuttle back and forth.
Back and forth to the mainland.
And negotiations can go on for 9, 10 months or a year.
Wow.
No, it's a drastic and terrible thing, but they're very sophisticated. There's actually a stock exchange in Somalia. There is for hijacking. There are investors.
Amazing.
Yeah. You can invest in a piracy crew, and take a share of the ransom.
What do the poor ship owners do now? How do they combat this?
Well, the tide has turned in the last really year against the Somali pirates. There's been a lot more action against pirate bases on the ground.
Okay, on the ground. Okay,
yeah.
That's where they're getting them.
Al-Shabaab, which is one of the Al-Qaeda offshoots in Somalia, they have also been kind of natural enemies of the pirates because where there's Al-Shabaab, it's not going to be a pirate haven, so they're competing for resources. Somali piracy is I think on the wane.
Okay.
Which is not a bad thing.
No.
But one of the messages of the book and one of the messages of American politics, this conversation about being a force for good, is I think the West has to do the best job it can to rebuild a state, a real working state in Somalia.
That's a very good message.
Because you have a lawless land.
You do, and the people are desperate.
Don't expect them to be law-abiding.
Exactly.
I'm not taking sympathy with Somali pirates. It's just
pointing out the facts, right?
The human facts.
Yeah, exactly. And also, another thing I really thought was interesting about your book was the medical descriptions were so realistic. Did you have a physician review your earlier drafts regarding the medical treatment for such various horrific injuries that occur with all these weapons that are being used?
Well, again, to underscore, the PJs are first and foremost paramedics. And
okay.
so
they're all, every one of them.
Yeah. So you have to get that part right.
Yes.
So the first place I went to was the PJs.
Okay.
And I know a bunch of these guys. I've deployed with them. I've spent a lot of time up in Long Island at Jabriski Airport with the PJ guys there. And so the first place I went was to make sure that this was done the way they would do it.
Yes.
And then if you were to read all my 10 books, please do. But you'll notice in the back, I thank one fella, Jim Reddington, all the time. Jim was my roommate in college. And he's a physician. And so whenever I need a wound, I don't tell Jim the wound. I say, Jim, I need someone who's going to die in 35 minutes.
What will happen to them?
Describe
that.
Yeah, so tell me what wound that is.
Yes.
You know, I need, it's all part and parcel to research.
I love the fact that the clock was ticking and the protagonist had to hunt down the pirates within a short time frame. I mean, have you used that ticking clock element before?
Oh yeah, I mean, look, the ticking clock is an indelible and unavoidable component of any really good adventure thriller. The thriller component of any good book comes from a ticking clock. It comes from a protagonist and antagonist both racing the clock to some meaningful end. So yeah, and that's always fun. That's always fun to compose as the writer, as the author, is to go, okay, now I've got this setting.
It raises the tension, doesn't it? Yes.
And then you invent this gigantic thing that you rest on top of the whole story and say, look up, boys,
That's right, that's right.
This could go wrong.
And also, another thing I enjoyed about this book was the fact that there was a woman aboard who is very mysterious but vital to the story. I mean, what can you say about Iris?
Well, Iris Sherlina, she is a Russian. She's a metallurgist.
Okay.
And golly, all I can say is pay attention to the passages about Iris because she's not there for window dressing.
Exactly right. Well, David, it looks like we're a little short on time, so I wanted you to tell our viewers where they can find this wonderful book.
The book is my first book that I'm publishing with Amazon Publishers. It's a publisher called Thomas & Mercer. Amazon.com has started their own publishing house.
Okay.
And my agent and I and a lot of other writers are coming to the conclusion that Amazon not only sells a lot of books, but Amazon as a publisher themselves can throw a lot of marketing heft behind the books from the authors that they hire. So this book is oddly right now not available in any bookstore. It's only available online, Amazon.com, as a real book, and also as an ebook.
An ebook. Well, it's been great having you here, David. Thank you for joining us, and please join us again next month for a new edition of the Bookman's Corner. I'm Lois Lindstrom.